One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 3 of Apple TV's Severance, entitled In Perpetuity. This title's kind of a double entendre, if you will. In perpetuity, it means forever, which I think we can all kind of understand how that relates to this show. It's kind of a never-ending work cycle for the innies. And then also they go in perpetuity in a literal sense. They go in the Perpetuity Wing, something of a field trip that Mark takes the crew on. And the Perpetuity Wing is like a shrine or a monument to all the previous CEOs and all the different Egans. There's I guess the main attraction of the Perpetuity Wing is a replica of, I believe his name was Keir Egan's house. They all go in there and we continue to see Irving completely stand out over everything Lumen. And I think that what makes Irving interesting to me is that he's such a corporate guy. He's such someone who drank the Kool-Aid, not necessarily in a literal sense, but how that kind of term is used to talk about people who are kind of like brainwashed by corporate slogans and lingo, and they're just like totally bought in on everything that their job or their corporation tells them. Irving is that guy. He drank all the Kool-Aid, and he's totally on board with everything Lumen does. And I think that's interesting to me because it makes me wonder what Irving's outie is like. And I think finding out what Helly, Irving, and Dylan's outside life is like is going to give us a great deal of understanding regarding how they behave when they're inside. Like I said, Irving is totally into the company. He's bought in. He's a complete and total stan. Helly just wants to get out at every moment. And you can see the difference between the different characters. Like, Helly's new, and she's staunchly opposed to being there. Irving's, I'm assuming, not just the oldest, but also the most tenured, and he's totally bought in. So it's kind of like they brainwash you and kind of just like hammer you down until you're just totally bought in. And you see Mark is kind of like in a space in between where, you know, he is kind of bought in. He was made the new department head. He's trying to help Helly to not get herself put into the break room, which she fails at in this episode. But he also shows some level of interest in figuring out what's going on at Lumen while he's there. We see this when he notices Petey's map on the back of the picture. Now, this tells us a few things. One, this tells us that Petey was really thinking ahead. He mentioned a couple of times that he left a map for Mark in the office. So that means he would have known that either something was going to happen to him or that he was going to be leaving in some capacity or another to put the map in a place where he knew it would get found upon his exit. Because we know from Irving last week about what the routine is for how the pictures get swapped out when someone leaves and they need to get a new picture. So this showed a lot of foresight on Petey's part. And then as far as Mark goes, you know, any Mark would have no idea what this is. He would look at that, he'd see this map, and he'd just be like, okay, so I don't know what this is. He'd probably toss the picture and replace it, but there's something inside him. And Petey alludes to this. He says, you know, something like, you know, you've come in with your eyes red before. We got this joke about the elevator, you have an elevator allergies, but the reality is that you bring that pain in with you and you just don't know what it is. And I think that deep down pain in Mark has kind of been, I think, reignited by connecting with Petey outside of work. So now when he sees that map, he probably doesn't know what it is. Just like Petey said he doesn't know what his pain is, he probably doesn't know what this map is or represents, but there's something that's telling him to keep it. And he keeps the picture. He doesn't, you know, toss it and replace it with the Helly one. And I think that's very indicative of no matter how much you might separate the brain and try to keep the inside and outside versions separate, you are still one person. And there's something inside Mark that told him that picture was worth keeping. So I think this is a really interesting angle to take this, because it's almost like it's like trying to solve a mystery when you're not in the world of that mystery. And that doesn't make any sense. But like say you have a dream, right? And you wake up from that dream, but you don't remember the dream. How do you try to figure out what happened in the dream? Like, you can't. Like, you're just not going to remember it. So it's interesting to see Mark who should have absolutely no recollection of his outside life and his meetings with Petey, look at this picture of this map and see enough of something to let him know it's worth keeping. How do you connect your inside knowledge and your outside knowledge? It's like anytime he leaves, it kind of resets, right? Like he's got to wait until he goes back to work to continue working on the work mystery. But when he leaves, he doesn't get to continue working on it because it's a totally separate life. And now, for all we know, Petey might be dead. I'm thinking we're supposed to take from that Petey's dead. We saw him worsen throughout this episode. The visuals of him seeing both his outie life and his innie life at the same time, they worsen throughout this episode. And so, I mean, if Mark wasn't uninterested in reintegrating, he's really not interested in doing it now. It looks like it's going to end pretty poorly for Petey. But I started off kind of like just kind of going in, but like I love this show so much because it's one that just makes you think. My notes are always so long for this show, but I feel like once it's time for me to record, I don't have as much to say because I'm reading so much into it. I'm looking at every little thing like, is this a clue to something? And I think I might actually be overdoing that a little bit, looking for clues, trying to read into everything. And I think at times the show is just trying to be lighthearted or trying to provide something a little bit different. And I'm looking at like, is this a sign of something? I think everything is a sign on the show. So I had a few other things that I want to talk about. The Petey and Mark stuff is kind of like the meat of what I think I want to talk about and what I think was important about this episode. Before I continue, I'm sniffling. I'm a little stuffed. I'm getting over a cold. I feel pretty good today, actually. But if you hear me sniffling or anything like that, or my voice sounds different, if you're a long time subscriber to this channel, that's why. But I feel pretty good. So one of my questions about Selvig / Kobel was whether or not she had full knowledge of both worlds while she was outside. I didn't know if like Mrs. Selvig was just his neighbor. I mean, we know that they have the subsidized housing, that they work there. We find out in this episode for sure that she's not severed at all. Like she's just pretending essentially because she takes a phone call about a work thing while she's in Mark's basement. So that was a confirmation for me. And I think that's interesting because I'm wondering about Selvig and her relationship to and feelings for Mark. So let me go over a little bit of evidence of what I'm trying to lay out here. Well, one, we know that she pretends to be someone else when she's outside than she is when she's inside. And she doesn't acknowledge any of the outside stuff when she's inside. Two, she goes over and takes the package that Mark's what he'd be brother-in-law leaves on his porch, and then she goes in his house and she has a key, which I thought that was interesting as well. It will make sense that someone as high up at Lumen would have keys to all of the houses, I would guess in subsidized housing, but I don't know if she's high enough to be able to have a key. Makes me wonder how she got it. Then once she gets in, she's walking around and she opens what I believe to be the container that had Mark's wife's artwork in it, and she takes a candle. Why would she take that? And then she, when they're at work, when Mark comes in to ask her about going to the Perpetuity Wing, she seems very cold toward him, which is very different from how she behaves toward him when they're outside. And she throws a mug at him and says something like, I didn't want to do that, but I knew you could handle it. Something to that effect. It makes me wonder, is Selvig in love with Mark in some sort of way or obsessed with him in some sort of way? And because I don't feel like this is just I'm curious what he's up to, let me be investigative. This feels like something of an obsession. Like, okay, why would she have a key? Why is she digging through his wife's stuff like he wouldn't notice that? It also makes me wonder if, no, that wouldn't work out. Mark would have had to have extra procedures done. But why is she going through his wife's stuff and taking it? And then why did it almost seemed performative at that point for her to kind of like be aggressive toward him at work. So I'm wondering what Selvig's obsession with Mark is. Is it like a purely what are you up to sort of deal? Or is she kind of into him? I'm thinking she's kind of into him. And I'm wondering about taking this candle. Taking something that is important to him that belonged to his wife or was made by his wife. For what reason is she taking that? But that's one of the many mysteries that this show continues to lay at our feet that I'm sure we'll get answers to later. So Helly's Audi denies her resignation, and she has a series of different attempts that she makes to try to get a message outside, writing on her arms. She writes a message in a pen cap and tries to swallow it. I think that was one of the better scenes in the episode, is when Mark explains to her what happens when she gets caught with something inside her body with the messaging in it. He says something to the effect of, make sure you're honest with Milchick about how long it's been since you ate it, so that way he knows which end to start from. Like, wow, that was pretty dark. But yeah, I'm really curious as to why Helly is so intent on leaving. And again, this was a procedure that she voluntarily did. So what is going on in Helly's Audi life that makes her refuse to let her any, I guess, reintegrate into regular life? And why is she so obsessed with getting out? To the point of, like, you know, she scratched her arm up on the glass. What exactly was she trying to do with that note? Because she's sticking it out, and she tried to, like, stick her head out. And it made me wonder if she was trying to, like, the same process that happens in the elevator. Like, when you go midway through the elevator and you see them kind of just go, like, you know, and that's when they kind of like change over from their inside version to their outside version. It makes me wonder if she was trying to stick her head out to see if she would turn into her outside version and see the note. Or her brain would kind of like become her outside version and see the note. We don't know if that's the case or not, but that was an interesting scene too. And then she ends up going into the break room. But before I go to that, I still want to wrap up the Selvig thing. I want to solidify that I think she might actually be into him, and there's some sort of romantic thing there, but I don't know. But like I said, we learn what happens in the break room. Helly goes in there, and she has to. We knew that they read that script, and then we knew that they had to repeat it. But I think it hits home a little bit harder when we see somebody like Helly, who we know is staunchly opposed to all things Lumen. How many times she's gonna have to read that before Milchick's little lie detector thing says that she means it? Because it's going to get to a point where she does mean it because she wants to get out. Like, but I feel like that could take hours with somebody who's so staunchly opposed to being there. Whereas if somebody like Irving gets sent to the break room, he gets going to read the shit one time and he's good. Like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, Irving's totally bought in. Let's see. So I already mentioned Mark leaving the map for Petey. Mark seeing the map that Petey left for him. Finding out about the other characters' Audis, I think, is incredibly important. I'm really interested too in Irving's Audi. I didn't mention this in my previous video because I didn't want to do anything with spoilers, but Irving starts to kind of like hallucinate what looked like tar coming down on his cubicle walls, and he had like what I thought was like dirt under his fingernails, and I can't. I don't know. I'm not supposed to know, but my brain is working. Like, what is he doing outside of work that he's like dirty and he's seeing tar? Like, I don't know. Irving's outside life is probably the one that I'm most interested in. But then you look at Dylan, who just seems like he's just there. Like, he doesn't give a shit. He's got jokes. And Zach Cherry was very funny in this episode, by the way. But he doesn't seem to have any particular feelings either way. He doesn't hate it. He doesn't love it. He's just there. And I feel like he's gonna have a really sad story or something for why he went through the severance procedure as well. But so I have a couple of thoughts, and I'm gonna wrap this one up. I'm at about 13 minutes. Who's been calling Petey? He got a call in episodes 1 and 2, or 1 or 2, and he kind of ignored it. And at the end of this episode, Mark discovers Petey's cell phone underneath the couch, and it's ringing at the time. And it makes me wonder who's calling him. And he mentions his daughter. I think he said her name was June. And it makes me wonder, is it maybe June calling him? Does she have any knowledge of, like, has he shared this with anyone else? Could June be a resource that Mark could use to get more information about whatever it is that Petey knows if Petey is actually dead? So whoever's calling him, I think, is probably fairly important, especially he's on the run. Like, there's not too many people who should even be able to call him. Like, I feel like that's got to be like a burner phone or something. Like, he's completely paranoid of being caught. So I don't think he just have his like regular cell phone and regular number. Like, I feel like whoever's calling him is somebody important who wouldn't know, who he wouldn't give his number out to that many people. So it must be somebody important. I know they don't know the number. They don't know the number of departments there. when they were walking through the long halls. And speaking of which, the long halls, again, we see that again, not just from elevator to Mark's area, but from other departments, from one department to the next. Long hallways, keeping all these people really separated. I think that's going to come into play as well. But yeah, they don't know the number of departments, and I think that's interesting as well. Like I said, Zach Cherry was really funny in this episode. I feel like his character is going to be one of those ones where you kind of look at it as just comic relief, but at some point he's going to be really important, and whatever his outie does is probably going to be important as well. Oh, and then, like I mentioned, I think the scene where Mark explains the pen cap thing was pretty cool. So, really great episode. I'm loving this show still. I can't wait to get the next episode. Like, this is one of those ones where, like, we get to just kind of theorize for 6 days while we wait for the next one. So do it. Load up the comments with all your theories. I had a really great time doing that with Yellow Jackets. So whatever you think might be going on, lay it on me and we can talk about it. And we can do that for the next week. Until episode 4, peace.